Dean Martin was known for filling rooms with laughter. His voice carried warmth, ease, and a kind of charm that made people lean closer without realizing why. Yet on this particular night, those closest to him remembered something different. The room was loud, crowded with confidence and power, but Dean was unusually still. He sat quietly, his expression unreadable, his glass untouched. Some recalled that it wasn't the silence itself that felt strange, it was the weight behind it. A single comment had shifted the air, turning casual humor into something sharper. No one yet understood why the moment mattered, only that it did. Dean Martin, a man who made his living by smoothing tension, did not smile. He did not interrupt. He simply listened. Those who later spoke about that night said the change was immediate, though subtle. The laughter softened. Conversation slowed. It was as if everyone sensed they were standing at the edge of something personal, something Dean rarely allowed into public view. Whatever was about to happen would not involve raised voices or dramatic gestures. It would be quieter than that, and far more lasting. The moment is often placed in the early 1950s, a time when Dean Martin was transitioning from nightclub success into Hollywood stardom. The setting, according to those familiar with the story, was a private gathering, dim lighting, polished tables, cigarette smoke hanging heavy in the air. These were rooms where deals were spoken softly and respect was understood without explanation. Dean had grown comfortable in such spaces, but he never belonged to them in the way others did. He came from a different world, one shaped by immigrant roots, modest neighborhoods, and quiet endurance. That contrast followed him everywhere, even into rooms filled with influence. The emotional stakes were unspoken but real. Reputation mattered. Words traveled quickly. And in that era, humor could blur into insult without warning. People measured reactions carefully, knowing that restraint often carried more meaning than anger. It was in this controlled, watchful atmosphere that the comment was made. Not shouted, not emphasized, just casual enough to test boundaries. And everyone waited, not for an outburst, but to see whether Dean Martin would let it pass. Dean Martin rarely spoke publicly about his family. Those close to him said it wasn't secrecy, it was protection. His private life existed behind a careful emotional boundary, one he maintained even as his fame grew. That absence of explanation often left others guessing at what truly mattered to him. At the center of that silence was his mother. She represented a life before applause, before spotlights. She was part of a past he carried quietly, without spectacle. Some believed that Dean avoided conflict because he understood how fragile dignity could be once exposed. The conflict that night wasn't loud. It lived in what wasn't said, in the pause after the remark. Laughter lingered awkwardly, unsure whether it belonged. No one rushed to fill the silence. It was as if the room itself was waiting for direction. For Dean, the moment stirred something unresolved, not anger, but responsibility. Those close to him later suggested that he felt an obligation not just to himself, but to where he came from. This was not about pride. It was about preserving something sacred by responding in the only way he believed truly mattered. Dean Martin's public persona suggested ease, but those who knew him well described a man deeply observant and emotionally measured. He listened more than he spoke. He noticed tone, intent, and timing. His calm was not accidental, it was cultivated. He had learned early that reacting too quickly often revealed more than intended. Instead, Dean chose patience. He allowed moments to unfold before deciding whether they deserved a response at all. Many interpreted this as indifference, but it was closer to discipline. Those close to him said Dean disliked humiliation, especially when it came disguised as humor, yet he rarely confronted it directly. He believed dignity was strongest when it did not need defending loudly. That night, his stillness was not hesitation, it was clarity forming. The comment about his mother crossed a boundary he never announced, but always honored. It wasn't rage that moved him.
It was certainty. Dean understood power differently than most people in the room. He believed respect could be restored without force, and that the most effective response was one that left no room for escalation. His strength, as always, was restraint. Long before fame, Dean Martin was Dino Cricchetti, the son of Italian immigrants who worked hard and spoke little about sacrifice. His mother, according to biographies, was steady and uncomplaining. She carried the weight of survival without seeking recognition. Dean often credited her with teaching him composure. When things were difficult, she did not dramatize them. She endured. That lesson stayed with him, shaping how he moved through success and scrutiny alike. Friends recalled that Dean rarely discussed his upbringing in detail, but when he did, his tone changed. It softened. There was gratitude there, and something close to reverence. He knew his success was built on foundations laid quietly by others. That night, memories surfaced uninvited. Not dramatic scenes, but small moments, meals shared, encouragement given, sacrifices unnoticed. These were things not to be defended aggressively. They were things to be honored carefully. The legacy Dean carried was not of power or fear. It was loyalty. And loyalty, to him, required a response that reflected the values he inherited, not the expectations of the room. The remark landed lightly, almost playfully. Some laughed. Others glanced toward Dean, unsure how to react. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then Dean lifted his head. Those who later recounted the moment said his voice was calm, even gentle. He did not raise it. He did not accuse. He simply addressed the comment with clarity. His response was short, so short that some barely caught it. He spoke of his mother not with defensiveness, but with quiet certainty. There was no threat in his words, only a boundary made visible. The simplicity of his tone changed everything. The room fell silent, not out of fear, but recognition. The humor drained from the moment, replaced by understanding. No one challenged him. No one laughed again. It was said that the power in the room shifted, not because Dean demanded respect, but because he embodied it. His reply left no space for argument, no need for escalation. It ended the moment completely. What stunned the room was not what he said, but how little he needed to say. Some remembered Dean lightly touching his glass afterwards, not drinking, just grounding himself. Others recalled a pause, a breath taken before conversation resumed. These small gestures became symbolic in hindsight. The symbol for many was his voice itself, steady, unshaken. It represented everything he inherited and everything he protected. In that brief exchange, Dean carried generations of quiet strength into a room built on dominance. There was no dramatic exit, no lingering confrontation, just the sense that a line had been drawn respectfully and permanently. The object of mockery was transformed into something untouchable, not through force, but through dignity. People later said they never heard another comment like it again, at least in Dean's presence. The symbol of that moment lingered, not as a warning, but as a lesson. Respect, when expressed calmly, can echo longer than intimidation. And in that room, the memory of Dean's response became a quiet reminder that some things are beyond humor, beyond testing, and beyond negotiation. The evening continued. Conversations resumed. Glasses were raised. On the surface, nothing dramatic had occurred, yet those who were there sensed that something had changed. Dean did not dwell on the moment. He did not repeat it later or claim victory. He simply returned to being himself, measured, controlled, observant. That was how he resolved things. There was no apology demanded, no explanation offered. The peace that followed came from mutual understanding rather than agreement. It was said that even those who held power in that room respected how Dean handled it. The story lived on not as a confrontation, but as an example. Over time, it became less about the remark and more about the response, less about offense and more about boundaries. Dean Martin carried on, as he always did, letting his actions speak quietly. The moment did not define him, but it revealed him. And sometimes that is more powerful than any ending. Stories like this endure because they remind us that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits calmly, waits patiently, and speaks only when necessary. If this moment made you reflect on dignity, loyalty, or quiet resilience, share your thoughts in the comments. Many viewers bring their own stories of similar moments, times when calm carried more weight than confrontation. If you appreciate thoughtful, emotionally grounded stories about legendary figures, consider subscribing to the channel. These narratives aren't about spectacle, they're about understanding character, legacy, and the moments that shape how we remember people. Thank you for listening and for taking a moment to reflect.